Today we're talking with Ali Couchman. Ali is an extremely intelligent woman by anybody's standards, and I would say something of a force of nature. But listen to what happened when she moved up from micro BNC to a full-size Entreprise Individuelle. Did the French business model get the best of even her?
Ali, thank you very much for agreeing to do this because I know that your story is going to be really valuable to a lot of people. Before we get into that, actually, your job sounds super interesting. What is it that you actually do?
So I'm a consultant, work in the learning and development and talent development field, helping organizations build out performance management plans and systems, career frameworks, career development plans, and I'm also a career development and goal achievement coach as well.
So do you normally work with individuals or normally within big commercial structures, or how does that go?
So my bread and butter has been consulting with large organizations, but really what sort of sparks joy in me, that kind of thing, is working with individuals, and that's really where I get the most reward from, and working with really small businesses and startups.
And so you first moved to France how long ago?
2018. I'd always wanted to at some point work for myself.
Set up your micro, and I imagine that that was just for the simplicity of administration and so on at the beginning.
I had no idea what the business structures were like in France. I came across eventually a handholder that helped me with the setup, was advised of the type of setup that I had, that it was like the most basic of the business structures, and that I would need to make my declarations to Social Security, once a month or once a trimester, and then also I'd need to do my personal income tax.
So that kind of leads me to my next question. Well, it sort of answers my next question. I guess you didn't realize at the time exactly how beneficial this regime was for you, given your low overhead.
Yeah, I had no idea. I mean, a lot of it was building the plane as I was flying. Right? Yeah, I had no idea that it was that micro entrepreneur was so good for somebody like me who had very low overheads. We get that abatement of like 34%, which is supposed to, okay, so these are your business expenses, which I wasn't even touching the sides of 10%, let alone 34%.
But you didn't even realize how you were winning. You were just like, yay, this is normal.
I want to be as successful as possible. And so it never occurred to me that there would be what feels like any penalty for being successful. But I didn't expect that it would be what I've calculated to be a 104% increase in social charges. The income tax stays the same, but it's charged on profit. So I lose that 34% abatement now.
Yes,
because my profit, I run at about a 90 to 95% profit. So, for every €100 that I earn, I get to keep about 30 to 33 euros. But if 10 euros of that are expenses, then really I get to keep 23.
So it's not that you're being particularly penalized, it's your lack of overheads that are making it so much more expensive for you than the micro ever was.
Yeah.
As you said, there's a 104% increase, which means that you have to earn more than twice as much to be at the same place that you were before. Did nobody at any point explain to you that this was going to happen?
It was always thought, okay, if you earn over the threshold 2 years in a row, you'll go on to the next status. But there was never any real information about what the next status is. The information, it's out there, but you either need to really ask the right questions. Accountants that I came into contact with here for a long time were not really advisors. They were more like processors. URSSAF, AMPO never contacted me. The first I knew that I'd been switched over was that I was unable to make declarations in my micro entrepreneur space, which I've been doing up until April of this year. So I thought, okay, well, nothing's changed. Surely they'll contact me. The first thing that I knew is I got a bill in the post because, you know, URSAF love to do snail mail for 27,000 euros.
Because now they're doing like a big redressement over the whole time.
And I rang URSAF. Obviously, I was quite panicked, but so I rang them, and I had a conversation with a lady there, and you know, she was very pleasant and obviously understood my situation, but and she did tell me that they should have sent me something advising me of this change. So and unfortunately, at the same time, my forecast for the year was that there were a lot of contracts lined up. Unfortunately, the economic situation globally has been pretty dire, and at least 70% of those contracts have fallen away.
So at that point, sorry to interrupt you, but I think this is important. It could really help you. Is you can go back to URSAF and say, okay, I accept that for the period that I was over, I need to pay that now, but your estimations that you're charging me for this year are too high. I don't have those contracts anymore, and you need to lower them. And they can do that.
So I've dealt with URSAF before. I know that they're and the tax office are very they're very reasonable. You know, they understand. You know, as long as you can come to an agreement where, you know, you're going to pay it. They're not in the business of, you know, where you hear in some countries people go, I think like the US, right? Somebody hasn't paid a tax liability, straight to prison.
No, they don't do that because they'd much rather get the money eventually, even if it's in smaller chunks and over a longer period of time. And I think people are scared of trying to broach that subject with them, but it's definitely worth doing because you 9 times out of 10 can negotiate. They will insist on the money that you owed for the time that you weren't paying it. But because it's late now, they probably will be charging you an extra percent, given that they've admitted that they should have advised you that this change was happening and they didn't. You explain that you understand that ignorance isn't an excuse and that you know you need to pay the capital, but that you'd rather not pay the interest on it because they didn't advise you, and so some of the responsibility is theirs as well, and would they please take that into account? It's called a remise gracieuse that you're asking for. I'll send you a message.
Okay, great.
And if that can take a chunk of it away, then that would also be better in your pocket than in there. Have you got a big takeaway for people? Is there any huge advice that you would want to pass on?
You know, assume nothing. Assume absolutely nothing. And another takeaway is consult an accountant early. So even if you're in your first year, consult an accountant, okay, and just ask all the questions. Doesn't matter how stupid you think the questions are, ask them. But if I could go back maybe a year or a year and a half, and what I would do differently is I would look at whether I could afford to stay under. So if I could afford to stay under the threshold for the second year, so earn as much as possible in that first year, earn just under in the second year, and then I can go and earn more the following year, and then earn just under. So sort of this peak and trough. But
absolutely, because you would never leave the system that way, and you could still exceed it by a good way in every alternate year.
A bit of pill to swallow, and I have been looking into my options.
I do really want to thank you for sharing all of that with the general public, and hopefully it will help a lot of people to not fall into the same problems that you've had and to know how better to avoid them.
Yeah, just essentially don't do what I did. Do what I would do now.